Thank you.
Let's just wait for a few minutes for the participants to join in.
Hope the presentation is visible in the full screen mode to all of you.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I can already see some people joining in. And I guess we'll wait for a couple of more minutes for a few more people to join, and then we'll start off. We are at 12:07. So, Orchi, do you suggest we start off? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Great. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining the webinar. And basically, when we were thinking and deliberating over what should be the topic. So while the key theme was clear that we wanted to discuss around hypo identification, talent identification, succession planning, but at the same time, we were actually deliberating on what should be the key theme to go ahead with. And that's where all of us kind of, realized that, gone are the days when organizations, HR professionals were still revolving around the question of whether and why talent identification, hypo identification was essential. These days, you will see a growing awareness about the importance of talent identification, having a sustainable leadership pipeline. There is a lot of literature available around the importance of hypo identification. You will find many research papers, white papers talking about what are the essential ingredients of talent or high potential. A lot of talk around resilience, agility, ambiguity management, change management, critical thinking, decision making, and so many other things. So clearly, organizations have realized the importance of identifying critical competencies to their organizational context, to their industry context. You speak to any L&D professional, HR professional these days, and they also will tell you the same thing, that their top management now understands why it is important to identify develop and retain top talent, because this top talent is then going to be their force multipliers who are going to model the same behavior and imbibe the same behavior in everyone they're going to work with. However, you will still find many of them who are not sure about how effective their talent identification process is. Many of them still feel that there is a scope for improvement in everything, in all the stages of talent identification, right from pre talent identification to during the actual process and then post the assessment or identification process. So that's where we decided that we should grab this opportunity and connect with some of the really brilliant minds from the HR fraternity on this topic. So here it gives me immense pleasure to introduce all of you to our today's speakers. Our first speaker is Piyu Gupta. Piyu is one of the most seasoned leaders in the HR fraternity with over 15 years of experience. She has handled and led various portfolios of HR function, right from strategy to execution. So you talk about digital HR, talent management, strategic alliances, diversity inclusion, various HR strategy transformation projects leading to organization design, competency-based talent interventions, process excellence, and so on. She has been associated with the likes of Panasonic and LG for almost 15 years, and currently she is heading the HR function in Hughes Communications in the telecom industry as Director HR. She has also been a winner of BW 40 Under 40 HR by Business World magazine, and she was listed in top 50 best women HR professionals across India, accredited by LinkedIn. So welcome to the webinar, Piyu. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Deepti. That's such a warm welcome and amazing introduction. I wasn't aware about it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Our next speaker is Nikita Panchal. Nikita herself is an executive coach and a global leader with an HR experience of over almost 18 plus years. She has done tremendous amount of work in the space of OD, talent management, diversity and inclusion. She has contributed fairly to strategic management, leadership pipeline creation, culture building, streamlining the business processes. She has also worked with many reputed organizations like Tata Asset Management, Motilal Oswal Securities, and currently she is associated with the ACG Group. She is a certified coach from International Coaching Federation, Leadership That Works USA, and she has done her MS in Positive Organizational Development and Change from the Case Western Reserve University, USA. She is a certified OD practitioner by ISAPS, and she has also had an advanced certification in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, what it is called as. So thanks a lot for joining us, Nikita, and we really look forward to gaining a lot of insights from you in today's conversation.
Thanks, Deepti, for the introduction. Looking forward.
Our third speaker is Dr. Kalindi Kale. She is really our partner in every sense. While Nikita, Piyu, we have partnered with them as our clients. Kalindi has been associated with us for a significant period of time as our empaneled assessor. She has helped us in every aspect, right from assessments to conducting training programs, coaching, etc. She has a rich 3 decades of experience in various industries. You name any industry, and she has worked in that: logistics, tourism, PR, media relations, finance, engineering, construction, education, and everything. She holds a PhD in strategies for OD interventions from University of Pune, and she actually made a transition from marketing to human resources because of her inherent passion towards people development and that inherent inclination towards helping organizations transform through enhancing productivity of employees. She has been a speaker and panelist on multiple forums. She has helped bridge the gap between the industry and academia by participating in various industry discussions, addressing faculties, conducting workshops for students. She is an ICF approved transformation coach and NLP practitioner, and she also holds certifications in psychometric tools, assessment development centers, and so on. So thanks. I'm really glad to have you, Dr. Kalindi.
Thank you very much, Dipti. That was indeed very warm. I couldn't have said it better myself. So it has been a lovely association with Mersometer. Yeah.
So yeah, without further ado, I would like to probably start off with our first segment. But before we start, there is a poll that we would like to here conduct and get some sense or get the pulse of the audience that is there. So there will be a question with some answer options on your screen. You will be given around 45 to 60 seconds, and you can cast your vote to any one of the options. So Archie, can we get it up? The question is, what is the biggest challenge in the process of talent and high potential identification? First is lack of awareness regarding difference between performance and potential. Many people, various layers in the organizations don't really understand how these two factors are different. Lack of a systematic process for hypo identification and succession planning. Lack of systematic developmental efforts post-assessment. Lack of a systematic process to validate candidates' performance and to justify ROI of the entire talent identification process that you are managing. And the last one is lack of time and resources. So I hope the question and the options are clear to all of you. Archie, can we stop and see the results? Okay, that's interesting. So almost this kind of resonates with our understanding because while we have a discussion with a lot of our clients, we also see the same thing. All of these problems are some way or the other prevalent in various organizations. In some organizations, they say that there is a basic lack of understanding about difference between performance potential and the other factors also coming in. So I have already spoken a lot. Maybe I would like to turn the mic to PU and hear her thoughts about what she feels about the challenges in this entire process.
All right. So thank you, Deepti. Okay. So challenges, while typically when we're talking about, the identifying, developing and retaining talent, and especially there are two phases now. So it was like before pandemic and like post pandemic now. So things have changed, and typically what we have done per se is we have segregated our whole potential pool into three things. So first we have to assess that what exactly the problem is, and then we have to really diagnose that what exactly we're supposed to do, and third would be the remediate. So these are the three things wherein we have segregated or probably put our buckets into. Otherwise, what challenges we are facing right now is firstly, of course, now, this time is like completely different from what we used to face earlier. And the 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 thought process of organization is changing. Now, initially, HR was responsible for employment. Now HR is responsible for experience. Initially, we were providing policies and procedures, but now we are the enabler of businesses also. And this is for the first time that four generations are working together in the organization. So when you start from like 21, 22, and then typically you have seasoned people in the organization 56. Now this delta is huge. Now to take care of somebody who's in the age bracket of 21, 22, and somebody who's in the age bracket 55 or 56, is a difficult job. So now, of course, every organization is facing challenges to keep the track of the performance and the potential of the organization. Now, now the other thing is what exactly we are doing. So, firstly, the challenges, if we talk about we are facing, is that people are missing out on their personal camaraderie. People are not interacting more. Initially, you can just walk down to somebody's room or to somebody's cubicle and you can speak, and probably things would be sorted out. But now things are different. People are not able to understand the psychological perspective to it. So now we have really so that was a difficult situation for us. Now how to get into the picture, so how and wherein you guys metal came into the picture, wherein we just asked your support that how we can virtually design or probably do a framework of competencies, and you can build those competencies for us, and then we will virtually do this all assessment and development centers. Now the other thing is people really can't differentiate between what are the assessment centers and what are the development centers. So there is a very, very thin line difference between AD and development centers. So that probably I'll come a little later. So this is what currently we are facing, and we are trying to bucket our problems into 3 phases, and probably then we'll take that forward accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks to you. This was really helpful and insightful. When we were discussing this with Nikita also before the webinar, she also came up with some very interesting thoughts around the same. So maybe I'll hand over the mic to Nikita and would like to hear what she has to say.
Thanks, Deepti. In fact, when you made this statement, the first thought that came to my mind was that what is talent? And are we able to first understand from an organization definition, who do we call as talent? And subsequently, we then look at, okay, how do I identify, how do I develop, and how do I retain? But what I've seen most organizations do is they set up the process before even the clarity of what talent they want to really retain, progress, develop, nurture is being understood. So we as an organization have spent a lot of time in demystifying the word talent, which essentially is the starting point of the process. And when I saw the poll, I think those are the intangibles, because it's easy to define a process because the process becomes very tangible way of making a performance rating or articulating an identification assessment center or looking at putting up a leadership development journey or ring-fencing talent for retention. But really defining and saying, who will I call in my organization as talent? And like you said, it's so diverse. You would have somebody handling a critical role who's a talent. You would have somebody who is, been in the organization and has a lot of organizational knowledge and equity. That could be talent. Or you could have somebody who's just joined in the organization but has a very rare skill and maybe very difficult to find and difficult to replace. So for us, the first work for any organization is create your own definition of talent. So we have created definitions in terms of who are the critical role holders? Have we identified who are those critical role holders in the organization? Which of those roles in the organization are extremely critical? What's your definition to critical role? Then we have the second category, which is transformational role. Where we look at which are those roles which may not necessarily be important right now, but they are actually fundamentally going to transform the organization from the next 3 or 4 or 5 years horizon. And incubation of those skills might be essential now for changing the game for the future. And are we able to, identify that? And the third category is definitely related to continuity and sustainability, which is what are those skills and capabilities that you need to sustain the level of growth, sustain the level of business opportunity capitalization in your organization. And have we identified those roles as well? Now, once we have these buckets identified, then you think, okay, what do I need to do with the people who are in these buckets? How do I identify the talent so that I know that these roles exist? These are the 3 categories of roles that exist. And if I have a key talent which is going through the entire assessment center and development journey, where do I put the box and the person together? So when we look at talent assessment process, we typically look at it from the person's lens because an individual is going through an assessment and we are made to believe that it is about only the person. But no, from an organization lens, it is about the role and the person together. And that is when the shift happens. So for us, that has been the key game changer. The second thing that I want to also bring to the conversation is we typically talk about what's in it for me as an individual in the entire assessment journey. Now, the second side of the coin is what's in it for the organization. And hence, most of our processes start with what's the organization strategy? In which direction is the organization wanting to go? What is going to be imperative or pivotal from a future standpoint? And in order to fill that gap, what is the direction of talent that I want to take? So that is going to call out what I want to identify. That is going to call out what I want to develop and why I want to develop. And that's going to call out what is it that I want to ring fence for the future. So linking talent identification, development, and retention process to your group strategy, to your organization strategy, becomes the starting point to ensure that when you are eventually asked for ROI, when you are eventually asked for what's the impact of this process to the bottom line or to profitability, you are very clear on why are you doing what you are doing. Yeah, that's the two bits from my side.
Yeah. Interesting, Nikita. Actually, when we were discussing about this offline, you made a very interesting point of building the entire ecosystem within the organization as the fundamental foundation of your talent identification process. And now you have narrated how you went about doing that very nicely. So this is really good to hear. I will move to Dr. Kalindi now. She has worked in her own individual capacity also with a lot of organizations as an independent consultant. So it will be interesting to understand from you as to what do you think about the typical challenges you have come across at the organization space.
Sure. I have been noting down the points which have been mentioned by Payu as well as Nikita. And yes, a lot of things have come out very interesting from that side of the table. My perspective is from the other side of the table as an assessor, what I feel the challenges are. And I think it stems from what both of you just mentioned, Nikita and Payu, that the environment, the clarity that the organization needs to have. Why are they doing it? What are they doing? What are the roles? And therefore, what competencies are required? That is something which sometimes goes amiss. As an assessor, if I get into a DC program, I see a little bit of gray in some companies where this clarity is not there, and they just do it because year on year they have to do assessment centers and they have to, right? It's more either a compulsion which is felt on organization level or maybe from the human resource level. So being ill prepared for what are you really looking at? Or not having clarity yourself. That is one thing which I've seen. Also, I've seen that still some places performance appraisal ratings are somehow mismatched or mistaken for the potential. Good performers, I meet very good performers in the center as candidates, but these performers are not cut for the competencies that the organization is looking for. So that is one of the gaps which I see. The other gap which I see is somewhere, assessment center, being a part of development center is a very, company is searching for talent, right? Company searching for what is good in that candidate. Somehow, uh, people don't want to leave out the entire cadre. So the entire cadre is put into the assessment center without really internally reflecting about should they be. Nikita just spoke about the return on investment. The return on investment in such cases, because they're not okay. Okay, sometimes we wonder why these people are in the assessment center. So a little bit of care over there will enhance the return on investment. So maybe if there is an internal climate and an environment where the seriousness about what is an assessment center, why does it need to happen, it is a privilege being there, how I can take efforts to be in the assessment center, be there and be feel good about it. Those gaps I definitely see happening with some of the companies, not all. There are some amazing companies which have a very crystal clearly defined roles, the competency matrix, a before, after, a between path. So yes, there are some companies which definitely do that. but for a few companies, I have seen these very obvious gaps.
I agree with you, Dr. Kalindi. Definitely compared to a few years back, the scenario that was there, there is a growing number of organizations who are investing into identifying critical competencies, understanding the critical roles, mapping the right kind of competencies to or maybe the relevant competencies for each role. Definitely, there is a growing number, but yes, there is some scope for improvement in that particular segment. But I'm really glad to get a diverse viewpoints from all of you on this particular theme. So now that we have discussed about the challenges, let's talk about how we go about the hypo identification and succession planning process in our organization. What are some of the things that we do, or some of the hygiene checks that we take care of, especially with the advent of technology? A lot of organizations are very actively investing into technology for talent identification, development, retention. So just want to hear about your thoughts on how you have made an effective use of technology and the other things, and how you feel using tech in the time where we are all moving to a remote hybrid working scenario. There is great resignation that has happened. So in the view of all of these challenges and scenarios, what do you think are some of the measures that you have taken or you're going to take in future? So PU, maybe you can.
Sure. So Deepti, what Nikita and Kalandi, they have mentioned, I probably resonate with that. And the world is changing, and especially similarly the employee force as well. So initially, we were facing a lot of challenges that how exactly to identify the high potentials, because that's a very common terminology. And whenever I used to speak to my management, so it was all motherhood, right? So we are supposed to do the behavioral changes, we are supposed to bring the functional changes, we are supposed to identify the values and beliefs, but it was all motherhood. So there was nothing beyond than that. Then probably we had a deliberation session that what exactly we want to do, let us focus on that. So initially we identified the value system of our competencies. Now the competencies are very different. So for competencies, there are behavioral set of competencies, there are functional set of competencies, and then there are the value system, right? Values are basically your culture fitment and all that stuff. And behavioral are the competencies wherein how you're going to behave in the organization and what are you supposed to carry along with in terms of the legacy. And the functional are, of course, your functional technical part. So we were facing a lot of challenges. We spoke to a few of the leaders, and then believe you and me, there was so when we sent across a list that you tell us that how many employees of your division are under the list of high potentials. So they were like almost 80% of them were the high potentials. And somehow the business was not happening. So it was like, why the business was not happening in spite of the fact you have so many high potentials with you? So how are you going to drive this? And we were facing a lot of challenges. For them, everybody is a high potential. Please give everybody 5 ka rating, and you have to be like all gaga over the words. Still we were under the loss, and we were wondering that how we are going to drive this. Then probably we sat again together, and we segregated into 3 parts. The first one was the high potential, the people, those who've been exceptionally well. You put them in any job, in any culture, they will perform well. The second was high asset employees, wherein they are, of course, internally, they are doing brilliant. They have been part of your organization since ages. They know their internal tasking, but somehow when you put them in some other task, they won't be able to, cope up with that. So those are the high asset values. And third one, the passengers. So we segregated our whole group of employees into the passengers, the high assets, and the high potential employees. And we put up this several criteria because if we choose their performance rating, the performance rating is also the forced bell curve. So probably you can't put a lot of people under the one rating which is like brilliant, so you have to forcefully put him to 2 because you have to fit your bell curve now. So again we face challenges how we are going to segregate our employees into the high potential list. Then we find out one method wherein again we took help of Dhanur and team, probably, so they are part of Metal, wherein we designed and we customized our capability assessment tool, wherein we did the 360 degree for all the supervisors. We did the behavioral event interviews wherein there were like multiple assessors. They did a lot of simulation exercises, a lot of caselets were there, a lot of case studies, a lot of psychometric tools we involved. And then we did their aptitude test, and then we did their intelligence test, which was more towards the cognitive part. Then we just drive out the results, and the delta was absolutely different. There was a paradigm shift. The supervisors, those who were sending the data that, you know, my XYZ employee is high potential, he was falling under the category of passenger. And somehow few who were like in the category of passenger were falling into the high potential. Because, you know, a lot of at times, you know, in the organization, these you know, the soft skills also comes into the picture, that, you know, this is my boy, he's been working with me, like, so you get all the loyalties bonus out there under the high potential list. So somehow we could manage that, and then we got a really robust list with us. And especially the succession planning. So once we did our whole competency framework, we did our whole tooling part, we did this whole capability assessment exercise, then we went into the you know, the succession planning, that you have to really define who your successor is. And believe you in me, it really doesn't matter if you are having 25 years of experience, so somebody who's having like 19 or 20 years of experience would be your successor. No, it generally doesn't work like that way. Somebody having 12 or 13 or 14 years of experience could be the successor of somebody who's having 25 years of experience. So organizations typically shy away with this fact that somebody who's like less, probably a level down to you, would be only your successor. No, we have always tried to, you know, groom our talent in a way. If somebody having brilliant pedigree, amazing, you know, legacy with him, amazing culture fitment, the value system, the belief, the attitude, the approach, why can't be a successor to somebody who's having 25 years of experience? So we changed whole algorithm. And then we came into this picture that how we are going to drive this high potential identification and give the succession planning. So this is the whole picture. I believe I can just put down in the paper. So I think what Kalindi mentioned, it was like similar lines, that, you know, this is what the organizations typically face. And Nikita, yeah, of course, absolutely resonate with you. So this is my thought, Deepti.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice to hear and see, kind of visualize the entire process that you have undergone in this whole exercise. So really good to see that. Before I move to Dr. Kalindi, I would probably like to hear from Nikita as to what has been her journey of doing this in ACG and in the previous organizations.
Yeah. So for us, let me start by sharing that the entire assessment process at ACG is a little more than 10 years old. And you know, when a process is there in the system for such a long time, it matures and reaches a point of efficiency where it becomes self-sufficient. So we do not have a bell curve. So we do not have post-rating systems. We do not have mechanisms where we are going to be telling our managers or leaders that this is what we expect of you. And what we've realized quite at early stage of the entire assessment journey is that our job as HR is going to be to build the collective consciousness and build in more business partnering opportunities for every person who is going to be affected or is going to be included in the process. So if you like what you mentioned earlier on the ecosystem bit, we did a lot of work around building that relationship, building that partnership. And what happens as an outcome of that is that we do not need as much of rules and governance, because there is this level of awareness that is there in the individual, that this is what this process is supposed to serve. And this is what I need to do in order to make it serve that way. You know, which currently happens to be the yardstick that HR guys hold, you know, because we know what the process is going to serve. But if you were to sample out 20 managers or 20 leaders in your organization, really ask them, would you get the same answer? They might say, I want my guy to get promoted, or I want my person to go to the key talent pool. They will not say that let the best talent have the best opportunity. Or they would not say that let me really assess in a very neutral way what is the potential of this person and what best I could leverage him or her for. So we have done a lot of work in everything which is other than system and process to begin with. And that is where I feel it has created the bedrock or the foundation for this process. When we reach to the 10th year of the assessment process maturity, we realize that the offline process serves a particular purpose. And that was also the year when we were hit by the pandemic. But there's also an opportunity to move to an online process, but it also has, if you look at it independently, it also has its own pros and cons. But when the moment you look at both the processes together, and you say that, okay, what is the best of the two worlds that I can fuse together, and what can it serve? And that's when the entire game changes. So for us as well, we have an excellent, we had a competency framework, which we eventually said competencies only measure behaviors. They don't measure motives and intents. They don't measure what's below the iceberg. They measure what's above the iceberg. So we now move to a persona framework. This persona actually drills it down to a more deeper level of understanding of what the person is constituted, not what the person chooses to show. And so our entire assessment center is designed on the entire persona framework, both at the behavioral end and at the functional excellence end. And then we also have our cultural fitment areas. But when you look at only an offline process, there are a lot of biases that offline processes also bring in. Because finally, the person who is also assessing you on the other side of the table is a human being. And no matter how much we work on ourselves, there is a collective bias that we all carry. And we were wanting to make the process a little more neutral, a little more holistic, a little more acceptable and inclusive for the individual. So when an assessment happens for me as a person, I don't have those questions that, I did this in the assessment in the role play, but is this what the person actually watched of me? Did the person miss seeing this data? Is this accurate? And I remember many times, excellent top performing associates would come back and tell us that my belief in the assessment center is not as much as my manager's belief in my performance, because there is a validation over there. There is a relationship over there. And we were wondering, how do we bring in more neutrality? How do we bring in a perspective which is also diverse, where the person is able to see both the data points and then do a more collective, holistic view about the assessment? And that's when we brought in the online to bring in more data, to bring in more balance, to bring in a more holistic way of looking at assessment. And what we saw as a significant shift after we did the blended, and we're doing it for 3 cycles now, this is the 4th cycle that we'll be running on blended, we realized that we don't have to sell the assessment reports to people. We don't have to work that extra mile to bring in acceptance. The individuals themselves are able to see the dots and connect them well. They know that they can't cheat the system, or the system will not judge them. The system does not know if it's a man, woman, age, young, old, belonging to a leader who is of influence in the organization, or is new joinee or veteran. The system doesn't recognize any of that. And I think that's the beauty of the process. The other aspect is that we are a global organization. We have representations from different cultures, different ethnicity. We've also had experiences where we have people from different abilities. There are people, when they come to a group which is of a particular composition, they hesitate to speak. They hesitate to be their best self in that group. And we've had people who have dyslexia. We've had people who had learning constraints. And when we speak to them after the assessment, they do tell us that we didn't have an advantage in an in-person assessment because our abilities come in between, And if I am from a country where English is not my first language, and I'm put into a group of English-speaking people, I will obviously not be able to communicate what I really wanted to. But when we moved them to an online and a blended assessment, we saw that these are the associates who really outperform because they didn't have the barriers. And what we realized is that assessment process should be as such which reduces the barriers and not increases it, because our motive is to assess the top potential of the person. Barriers help them reduce it. And when we blended this together, we realized that the accuracy and the efficiency of the entire process just shooted up. So we've had a lot of accolades from people, especially from communities which are marginalized within the organization, or representations which are generally marginalized in the society, come back and thank us, tell us that this is of value. I remember one person, I'll just say this last story and conclude, who had a learning disability. And he was extremely worried about the assessment, came back and said, can I get an extra 20 minutes to complete the online assessment? Because it takes me time to read a particular question and understand and respond to it. And I remember getting back to Mercer Medal, giving that extension, and that person was one of the top scorer, which we would not have been able to do if we were doing any other form of assessment. And I feel that this makes the process very, very inclusive. So that's how it's benefited us.
Absolutely, bang on, Nikita. So while we try to put together the assessment compositions in a virtual or a blended mode, we always try to have a good mix of highly reliable, valid, free from adverse impact tools, psychometric tools, personality, cognitive abilities, and then behavioral tools, so that we get a good mix of the actual demonstrated behaviors as well as the inherent inclinations and abilities. But here I would like to hear more from Kalindi, because she has been an assessor in a completely offline assessment center also, and she has seen this side of the assessment centers, which are either conducted in a virtual or a blended mode. So if you could throw some light on the technical aspects as to how it makes it more beneficial for the end test taker and adds value to the overall process.
Sure. Before I comment, I would really like to appreciate what Hughes company as well as Nikita's organization they've done. Bucketing into high potential, high asset, and passenger is such an amazing thought. I don't know. I'm sure it must be included, but high potential and high performers also maybe. I don't know what is the definition of high asset. So I'm just saying this. High potential and high performers are very, again, different category. High performers do very well in the current role. They don't have the potential of moving up. So that part, I really loved it, really. I love what Nikita said about persona framework. It was amazing if that is the way the organization is working, and blended assessment or online assessments being used for specially challenged people. That's a wonderful initiative, and this is my takeaway from today's session. We're talking about blended assessments, right? And HR really. So blended assessments. Can I go a step behind a little bit? I mean, both wonderful organizations being represented over here, but since we speak for the entire industry and through my experience, the competence for the desired role is a gap which I see. Sometimes the gap which I see is over standardization and stagnation of competence framework. I'm talking about competence framework because that is the basis of the assessment center. I've also seen at times the relevance of the competency matrix missing. So, for example, there are people sitting in front of me who are individual performers, but the rating scale is talking about something which is teamwork and working within through people. So about that, at times I've seen that very involved human resource departments, I must say, KU and Nikita. I sometimes I feel that the HR department is really working with a 12-foot pole in the organization. They need to get closer to who we are assessing as people and human beings. And one another gap which I've seen is the follow through of assessment center doesn't happen. So at times it becomes like a ritual, which doesn't have any logical conclusion. These I've seen blended assessment centers work amazingly well. Dipti, do you want me to comment on the blended assessment center which we conduct? Okay.
Yeah.
Blended assessment center, according to me, is something really amazing. When we say blended, what naturally comes to our mind is online and offline, right? Or we feel that there is psychometric test which is completely online, and even if it is online, even if it is virtual, let me use the word virtual. We have this case study presentations and role plays and CBIs, behavioral interviews. I look at blended assessment a little one deeper. There are psychometric tools which are real and current time. So psychometric tools essentially, what is your personality, what is your cognitive ability? We are talking about the truth of today, which is inside of a person. Then we are talking about behavioral interview. This is one tool which again talks about reality of today, but it is an expressed version of what is inside of a person. I give a lot of because see, whatever is inside of you, the personality. If you look at how the brain functions, we are talking about the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, right? We're talking about rational brain and emotive brain. The personality test and the cognitive test really takes care of your limbic thinking as well as the rational thinking. So we are mapping the whole brain. That too is blended. Yeah, we are not talking only about creative, only about rational. So there is blending. Though both the tools are online tools, it is a blending of understanding the emotional me and understanding the rational me. Uh, then it is blending of reality. So real me, rational me, plus what am I doing at work through behavioral interviewing technique? What am I doing currently at work? That becomes the real part. And then the role play and the case study presentation is something which is hypothetical, where most of the times the tool actually embraces what could be the potential role, where we are talking about high potential. So what could happen in the next role, and the whole situation is created around that. So there too, it is real and virtual. The real me and the virtual me, which could happen. It's not just about online and offline. So the way the blended assessment centers are designed actually takes care of this aspect of blending in as well, Dipti. That's what I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, many thanks, Dr. Kalindi, for throwing light on, as I mentioned, the technical aspects of this particular design. So this actually brings us to the last segment of questions and answers. There is a question that I have here. Maybe PU or Nikita, one of you, or maybe both of you could address that as to how you basically manage the situation. The question is, how do you manage challenges by the managers when reports don't match their understanding of the people? This is something which we discussed about briefly, but when it actually happens, when managers come to you and cross question you on the credibility of the reports, how do you handle that scenario?
You want to go first?
Yeah, all right, Nikita, go ahead.
Okay. So so this is a very, the moment you put up a process, you have to put up a process parallel to it to manage all the inquiries that come out of it. And this is, I think, a very typical scenario. So we've had this in abundance. And especially it happens in cases where the talent is extremely critical, high performing, or there's a fear of attrition. And the manager wants to ring fence at all cost. And we've realized that over a period of time that no amount of explanation helps the situation. And because there is always a counter view on every explanation. So what we have devised are mechanisms to be proactive in not having that situation occur. One is that we have a manager orientation program that happens before the assessment center. So while the assessment center is for the associate, and there is an associate orientation program also, which the incumbent goes through in order to familiarize about the assessment, the tools, the process, and the outcome and report templates, etc. But there is also a manager orientation program. Now, why is that important? Because we also set expectations on what are the responsibilities of a manager when an assessment center happens for their team. It's a joint accountability. It's not an HR accountability. So the moment you take the accountability onto you, then you become answerable to a question of this nature. But the moment you say that if a person fails, then you and me will answer that person together, then I think the inquiry shifts, because the manager will think twice before bringing that report or that concern back to HR. So that is one way in which we've equipped the manager, and we've said that in the RACI process, the accountability is with the manager. You could consult us in case if there are any concerns on the report thereafter. The second thing that we have done is that after the reports are given, there is a feedback conversation that happens with the assessor, the manager, and the associate, where again the manager is a part of the feedback conversation. The intent is to ensure that the manager enables the associate to receive the feedback. and creates that environment where the person is more receptive, feels safer to receive feedback, which is not sometimes good to hear. And that's when the manager steps into the circle and does not step out of the circle. And the third thing that we have done is that even if we have created these enablers, and still if the manager feels that no, there is a issue and I need to reopen the assessment or I need to redo this entire thing, then as per policy, we've had this provision that you could reappear in the next cycle. If you feel that there is a second chance that I want to give to a person, but there's a 6 months wait. So we have 2 cycles running in a year, and you come back fresh, work on whatever has been shared with you, come back fresh and give a second chance to yourself. But we do not encourage offline certifications and exception approval, because that is what takes away the merit of the process. It actually creates devalue for the process. So those are the 3 things that we have done from a practice and a policy standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to share your thoughts?
Sure. So I think probably those are the similar lines, but I think probably as an HR, we brutally failed while explaining to the managers that why their results are on the lower side or probably of the higher side. What may come, they will never understand you, because they will say that this is what HR always says, right? So they have this typical language that, you're driving this agenda, that's why you're saying this. And then we always come up with the same similar answer. For us, everybody's like same. So nothing is going to work when you are trying to explain to the managers. But then for that, we have, so that's why, initially I've also mentioned that we never, emphasize on one thing, because if you're only doing one exercise, then probably the chances are more, that data can be skewed to the delta. That's why we do multiple exercises, and that makes our job very easier, because then we come back to them and tell them that, see, this is replicated in all of the exercises. So it is not that only 360 is saying something, or probably the VI is saying something, or the cognitive is saying something. No, everything is there. It's so transparent that results are like almost reflective of each other. So then only probably you can get them to the grounds, or otherwise they will always tell that this is a square peg in a round hole, and it doesn't really work. So somehow that's why there's amalgamation of all exercises, and definitely we do all our part to make them comfortable, and then tell them that this is exactly what it is all about.
Yeah, the discussion is actually taking a very interesting direction, but in the interest of time, I will have to move to the next set of questions which are there. So somebody has asked, does the organization see any resistance from the nominated participants to be a part of these interventions? This is very important because we have seen dropouts in a lot of assessment centers. At the end moment, people drop out and say, we can't make it for the assessment center. So this is something which we would like to understand from you, how you address that and how you leverage the data post-assessment for any developmental intervention. So maybe you can throw some light on that.
Yeah. So Deepti, 2 parts of it. First, there would always be a lot of dropouts when the assessment center is going to happen. One day before, they will all have business calls, and everybody will be occupied with something or the other. So they will call HR that I'm not going to come for the assessment center. So they have their own logic behind it. But then in which ways, so we have those, process and thought process behind it that you have to be there. Now, once they are the part of the assessment centers, they, of course, they enjoy it. But the one thing which shows the resistance is that they always keep, coming back to you that what happened about the last year results. If you're not really sure that what exactly you did last year, and if there is no action plan to it, that what you've done last year, then, this whole piece of exercise is no value to them, because they will say that we did this last year as well. Why you want to repeat it again? This is just a blueprint, or you want to tick mark one of your activities. So it should, turn out into an action plan. Then only they will, appreciate it. And second thing, I'm sorry, I just missed out on your second part. So the first I've answered, the second one.
So what do you do with the data that you get from the assessment? How do you make use of it for post-assessment interventions?
Yeah. So we do have our system and the processes wherein we have the actionable points and we work on them. Plus, apart from that, we have a lot of interventions wherein what the gap analysis we have got, or probably what the TNI we have received, accordingly we work on them. So if somebody has, we see that if somebody has a gap analysis in their behavioral patterns, so then probably we will send them for either coaching or probably the other thoughts of the exercises, or we'll send them for the middle management programs, somewhat like that. And we do the action points. Of course, a lot of time we are not able to capture whole gamut of people, but then at least we try to manage our high potential. That we do for sure. I think I'm done.
Kalindi, I guess you had to say something.
Payu covered one point which I wanted to say, that lack of follow-through action. That's what makes them lose interest. I've seen this thing happening with some very senior people because they fear being judged.
Yes.
That is the resistance point. If you can put things in perspective for them, the resistance would go down. However, well, fear of being judged, everyone has. I mean, even the day when we are going to receive a result, whether it is 10th standard or 12th standard, we get cold feet. So that has been happening to us ever since. But that is one of the reasons. Yeah. Dipti, you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Dipti.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was saying we are not left with, I think we are just left with 1 minute, but one question I would want one of you, Piyu or Nikita, to address. Do you cover all the employees at all levels as part of the assessment development centers, or only from a particular level and above? And what is your take on that, basically?
So we do not cover all levels for the assessment because I don't think it's advisable to do that. See, every process has a particular level of efficiency that you want to create. And the efficiency also depends on what's the readiness of the person who's stepping into the process. And you might think that you've created the best of the process, but is it really required for that level of leadership? Is it going to add value to that level of leadership? And many a times the answer is no. So we do have assessments from mid-management to the top senior most management cadre, but we do other processes of internal assessments and cadre building and spotting talent and doing the 9 box or doing the internal review mechanisms or OTR mechanisms as process to identify and spot talent. See, what's very important is that it's not only about doing assessment, it's about what you do after that. And hence, doing assessment should also be done only if you're clear on what you want to do after that first step. And from an organization bandwidth standpoint, you will not be able to cater to everything. So making that choice becomes important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Nikita well said. So same stands for us also. So we don't cater to all the audience, and we have like set of people whom we select basis on few of the criterias, and then probably they go ahead with the assessments. So this is more about the efficiency of the organization as well.
Great.
If I could like can I add one point, Dipti?
Please go ahead.
There is one thing which, if it's a general question which is coming, the organization also really needs to decide what is my priority for this year, and then choose which group they want to assess.
Yeah, absolutely. So very interesting points. I would actually love to continue this discussion for the whole day, but we can't really. So, but thank you so much, Piyu, Nikita, Dr. Kalindi. Thanks a lot, all of you.
Hi, I think there's some connection leak on the
Yeah.
So I think the conversation almost came to an end. So thank you, all of you, for being a part of this discussion. We hope to, collaborate further in future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.